for tonight, and I'll have a roll call. As you know, Dustin, I think, contacted Matt, said he's running a little bit behind. He's in court or something. Ed's running a few minutes behind, and so is Scotty Maples. So.
Councilperson Yon.
Present.
Councilperson Hawkins.
Here.
Council President Gill.
Here.
Councilperson Owen.
Here.
Councilperson Ellis.
Here.
Councilperson Samuel.
Here.
Let the record reflect 6 present and 3 will be here eventually.
Let the record show when they enter the meeting. Okay.
We do have one request.
Okay.
Heather, when you speak, can you speak up the microphone? She's having a hard time hearing the minutes.
Okay. Well, and we need to make sure, Scott, your microphone's
my
on.
voice carries.
Your vote.
I can hear you.
Okay.
He's not the issue. All right.
So, there's Scott. Let the record show Scotty Maples. Okay.
We just did roll
I
call.
think most of the, it was the September 20th workshop where the motions were made, which I asked if you got your notes pulled up.
That's what I'm.
I think what the question I have, because I know that we're rereading the minutes, with just approving that one position, there's like 340,000 that not being spent in the budget because of just that mechanic position being approved, correct? That's what the minutes said, that will cover around 340,000 of the money needed. Do we have a more accurate?
On the latest.
I have it.
You have one that says 511,000 at the far right.
And that reflects the salaries that were, I guess what I'm asking is what were we short from 6.8? I have the one.
Yeah, that's the newest one.
That's correct.
Yes, I do have the newest one then. Thank you.
Here, I'll just.
Oh, you need it? Okay. Thought I had that. So that motion was made for the mechanic. And that 50,000 was for, in parks, for that special events that was taken out of parks, correct? Yeah.
Okay, so we're talking about September 20th, right?
Yeah,
So
the
those minutes
September 20th.
Approved at our last council. Okay.
Just to kind of refresh so we know where
Just
we're
to make
at.
sure. Thank you.
And then, then it was the police overtime of 100,000. And then we had where the motion was passed to increase the health insurance line to 6.8. We reduced medical billing for under police was reduced by 9,000. The recommendation to reduce the travel of the fire merit by 5,000 was made, and to remove 3,500 increase out of the safety manager. We did add the 10,000 for Oak Park. Y'all stop me if I'm missing something. And the 9/11 fund was due to the 972,416 because Sky just came back from a meeting and that was our accurate bill, correct? So, did I leave anything out?
Did you mention, there was, and I'm sorry for not being here out of town, did you guys rediscuss there was one of the raises for one of the department heads I thought we decided to keep?
Larry Wallace's.
And then we
Because
did
that's
do that.
not
Is that
paid,
correct?
yes, that's
Okay.
still the same, that's not being paid out of general, that's out of the building authority. So that did not change.
And-
No, I don't think anything changed from the workshop, because we didn't vote to change anything in council meeting, other than, I think a few of the members wanted to discuss, we did the 3% flat rate across, and I know there was some concern. I know there was some concern even with HR, and HR is here, that given a flat rate, now correct me if I'm wrong, if I get it wrong, but the concern is if they have an employee that's not performing, because we all agree we need to do the performance, but the flat rate was kind of discussed and voted on because there was discrepancy in budgeting for the 3%. Some was under, some was over. So we did the flat line. So that was some concern that was discussed, that given a 3% to an employee that's not performing, or does, morale for the departments, which is is a legitimate concern, or if action had to be taken against an employee and we gave a 3%, and because we don't know what their reviews are, it's not our job, we just put money in there, that we don't want to compromise a review, and they get a 3%, and then it's argued back against the city that, well, so-and-so just got a raise. Did that pretty much cover the concerns?
So is where we are then, is it
Well,
proposed that like you're saying that 3% will be the cap, but department heads can determine?
I think we need to do it so we don't cause any of those issues. Like, we can certainly discuss it. First of all, we want to make sure that 30% is budgeted accurately. That's what we need to make sure of. And then there was concerns about department heads, so we can cap the department heads not more than 3%. And then but this 3% that we need to say that the 3%, everyone's entitled up to 3%. Not everyone has to get that 3%. That's up to the department head. I think maybe if we did something like that, then the department head, if they feel that employee doesn't deserve the 3% according to their performance, which I think they're turned in November, then I think that will kind of cover us, other than right now we have a motion that says a flat rate of 3%.
Scott, I'll just add that basically after that discussion, we all agreed that we need a more collaborative workshop specifically on addressing some of these performance issues with Kim and with our consultant to be discussed after the budget process. So for more of the philosophical argument about performance and how we should give raises in the future, I think we were deferring to a future workshop for that.
Kim, if you would come up, I have a question. We keep bringing up that we're going to cap raises at 3%, and I believe the salary administration policy says raises are capped at 7%.
No more than 7% or $5,000
Or
in a rolling
$5,000.
calendar year. And to Callie's comment, the follow-up workshop really doesn't have anything to do with performance. It has to do with the pay grade.
I'm sorry, thank
You're
you.
fine, yeah.
Okay, where does that say no more than 7%? Because I got the
It's in the
ordinance.
salary administration policy.
I got the 2013 OR 10.
Yes.
Because it doesn't specifically say that. It does say, I think it's implied, because it does say in checks and balances that
That's why I've also
that if we
suggested that
go
we
above the
revisit
7,
that.
need approval of the council president or the vice. But we do have review and approve of city council will require any individual pay rate changes or changes to approved pay grades to their associate pay range to exceed established limits as specified in the section checks and balances measures. With reading through this, I don't think we're beyond our rights, and this might be a question for our attorney, that if we put a cap at 3%, I don't think we're beyond our, because it don't specifically say in here that we've always budgeted at 3% per employee. So we'll be budgeted right for 3% per employee. But us putting a cap on that where they can get up to 7% in the performance pool, but if we put a cap on that, or I didn't see where we were violating.
I guess,
Ask it back.
Rich question. Ask me your question.
I think I'm trying to answer Matt, where they're saying that about the 7%.
Is it possible to mention in another ordinance?
The money, you got a rule, right?
Right.
The money's budgeted, it's put in a stack, and then you're saying Ronnie is the head of the department, and he is in charge of deciding how the snack gets handed out.
Exactly.
Nobody gets more than 7%.
Correct.
That's okay.
That's the rule.
That's how
But
it
there's
currently is.
discussion about changing that and capping it at 3%.
So all you're doing is you're going to give everybody across the board 3%, right?
No. Well, that,
Capping the maximum to 3%.
It's at 3%.
For each
instead of
employee.
7%.
Well, you just
Right.
have to make sure that.
Well, that's putting the money in, what could, but see, here's what I didn't think we were doing, because we're budgeting 3%. That's what we've always budgeted before. And how they distribute that money, where some would get less and some would get more, the money kind of would even out.
Well, that wasn't the
Nobody ever
understanding
came,
that I
nobody
had.
ever came
See, that
back.
was why when you, from what I've heard, I understood Brian to be talking about this flat 3%.
A flat 3% for everyone, and it didn't have anything to do with a performance review. That's the way I figured, that's the way I understood it.
but that's not been the practice. So the policy is, the whole city council, we budget 3% of our combined salaries for the council raises in theory. And the council president gets to decide who gets what percentage. But as a whole, we have budgeted for everybody to get 3%.
Yes.
If she decides that everybody gets the same because she's the president. If Matt's not a good council person, I might get 0%. And my 3% can then be distributed to the other employees based on their performance.
Give
But
us
not-
greater than 3%.
But not to
Yes.
exceed 7%.
But not to exceed
Exactly.
7%.
Or 5,000.
Or 5,000.
But that wasn't my question. My question was, if we put a cap at 3%,
I will not.
well, right now they can go up to the 7%.
Cap that no one can receive more than 3% as their bonus.
As,
We'd
right.
have to amend the
Doesn't
original
that
ordinance, correct?
defeat performance evaluation?
But if you're giving a 3% raise,
Then you're not rewarding performance.
Cap their,
Okay, we're getting confused, or
Well, I
I'm like, the motion was made that a flat percentage of 3% was made across the board.
right?
And once that motion was made, concerns were brought to us by HR, especially for giving a flat raise, giving an employee that's not performing or doesn't meet the performance record or criteria. They may be underperforming or may not get a partial raise or no raise. They're worried about the morale for the other ones to see, well, they get a flat raise, and that, could it be a morale issue? Plus, if they have a bad performance and they weren't going to get a raise, but yet we set a flat 3% raise, I didn't want to put the city at risk to where they were, an employee would say they did, in the records, we don't know what records about each employee, but if they have a recent November one that says they were underperforming, but yet we gave a 3% raise, the
Well, we part
concern
ways
was,
with that
how would that
person.
be for morale? And two, how would that reflect back on the city if they say let's say the department had terminated that employee? They think the argument was, well, you just gave them a 3% raise, so how was my employee underachieving their job
it doesn't
performance?
matter. You're in
Yeah.
employment in the real world. You don't have to justify anything. You can fire for no reason, any reason, a bad reason, or no good reason, as long as you don't violate the Constitution. So all of that doesn't matter. You got to remember the difference between unemployment benefits and wrongful discharge is huge. So you're getting caught up on that.
I got a question.
All right.
Am I correct in this, that the council doesn't give any raises?
No.
We just put money in a pot,
Right.
and the mayor, HR, department heads,
Department heads.
they can spend that pot until it's
The
gone.
issue is which line item you put it. Right. Right now, based on the last meeting, it was decided that the 3% across the board raise for all employees and have a place for one series under their salary.
Right,
There was no money in the performance pool, it was zeroed out, my understanding.
correct.
So all this business about 7%, all that, it doesn't come into play now.
Well, it does come into play. If I have a department that has, 5 diesel mechanics and they've raised the line for diesel mechanics by 3%, that still doesn't have anything to do with the individual mechanics. I can spread that raise up however I want because they're all in the same line item.
No,
Yeah.
it's my understanding that as the budget is right now, it's 3% across the board for every employee.
In the budget,
Right, but if
In the-
there's 5 people in that one account,
right,
like 5 diesel mechanics,
Technically, then, let's say 2 of them could get 7%, right, and then the others would get nothing. That's what we're talking,
That's what the budget says.
versus,
I can tell
Where
you
do we
right-
get one?
I think from our standpoint, if the money's not in the performance pool line item, it's just gonna be a 3%.
That's what I understood.
I think,
But if the money's moved back to the performance pool, because when you read the salary administration policy, it's based on the performance. So if the money's not in the performance-based line item, I don't see how we would then get.
Based on our performance.
Based on performance.
Kim, I have a question.
So then what we did, we were
So-
having a hard time hearing with that thing back there.
Sorry. So in our current performance, the metrics that we use to grade performance, and I'm assuming that based on how an employee is rated in, various responsibilities for their job, then they get, are they eligible for a 0 to a 3% raise, or how is the actual raise percentage calculated from the performance sheets? Does that make sense? Or is it just the discretion
It's
of?
pretty discretionary. The problem is, and this is going to sound not real politically correct, and I don't mean it to come across that way, because 3%, I think, in this economy is very generous. I think everybody appreciates that. But when you're trying to award or reward really high performers, 3% per employee in a line item doesn't really give any manager, any department head a lot of scrutiny or a lot of discretion with being able to reward high performers without completely penalizing very low performers. Kind of to your point earlier, if you've got 5 mechanics and you've got 3%, okay, you've got 2 really high performers, then what do you do with the other 3? Just give them nothing? Well, then you're back to a morale issue. Then people consider cost of living. So, it's kind of all over the place, but to your point, yes, it's somewhat discretionary, and there's discussion typically between HR. Sometimes we have to get less involved in the department head. To Mr. Ellis's point, oftentimes with that 3%, unless you have a really, really poor performer, and last year, in the past couple of years, we have managers and departments have gotten much better about either giving 0 or giving 1% to try to make a point, to be able to go through that job description and actually point out inadequacies or performance issues and not reward those employees, which then gives you a 1%, and then if you have 2 or 3 really high performers, you get a 0.5, and we were actually splitting hairs last year. Some people were getting a 0.5%, just to split that 1%. So, does that help?
Yes, that does. Thank you.
Whoever is in charge of that,
It's still in it.
Yeah.
does that still make it?
Could be Larry, maybe.
Gave him an increase.
I guess if I was still in private industry and had to live under a performance review, I would have always been the lowest paid person there. And what, in private industry, when they decided to give a percentage raise to the people that was working there, everybody from the top to the bottom ended up getting a 3% or a percentage raise. It wasn't divided up among the people. One person gets one large percentage and another
Right.
person
And
gets a little
I
bit.
completely understand that. However, the city council did make a push 5-6 years ago to go to and move towards performance management. And that's what we've been doing for the past 6 or 7 years.
I live in that private system, and
Yeah.
I get a performance review every 6 months, and I get a annual review every year, and there's been times I got more than 7%. There's times I got 0% because the company wasn't giving raises, and sometimes 3% was the most the company ever did. So from year to year, even in the private sector, there's changes that happen, and I think that's all we're talking about here is maybe doing a year of doing something different. In the previous years, we've done a flat $1,000 raise or a flat $500 raise. And we've had a lot of years where we've done this performance, trying to build up the performance review system and compensate people accordingly. So I think it's just up to our discretion as the city council how we want to do it. And it seems like there was at least a majority at least at one of the meetings that just do a flat 3%, and I'm fine with that, but I think it's fine whatever direction we go. In the private sector, it bounces around just like we're talking about bouncing around here.
It's been at least 7 years that we've done the performance-based evaluations, because I remember it was in place when I started. And you mentioned last year and the year before were really the first few years that we've had department heads and managers actually
Right, 3 years.
splitting hairs on how they wanted to divvy up those raises. because they finally are taking it seriously. And now that we're taking it seriously and we're rewarding good employees and not so much on other employees, we're going to change the whole system again.
Right.
No, we're not.
I don't think
we
we're asking to change it. I think we're,
Yeah.
for 1 year,
Why would me as a department head take a week to do these performance evaluations if it doesn't matter? It doesn't mean anything.
it does
You have
matter.
to
You want to keep a job? You want to maintain your job? Do you want to be considered for another job in the future, an advancement of some sort?
No. As a department head. The employees don't do anything as far as performance evaluations. I mean, the administration of the.
It's your responsibility. It's your job description.
Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna wheel it back in. Because my question wasn't answered. A motion was made, and it passed, to do the flat 3% across the
What I
board.
understood, yes.
But I wanted to bring up some valid HR concerns. But my question, it was to you, because he had brought up about what, are we within our rights to do that?
Have just a flat 3% raise. Absolutely.
Okay, now I got my answer to my question. So, and that's why I said it, but I didn't want to cause any issues. We still want to do the performance pool. We're not doing away with anything because we're going to have internal meetings.
So that's, Mr. Owens, so tell me, and that's where I got confused. So you're going to do a flat 3% raise, but then you're going to budget money for performance bonuses.
Well, the way we've always budgeted for the performance and the performance pool line is Heather would take each one's in that department and she would figure it at 3%. That's how she always budgeted for the performance pool, correct? So we did that, but we put the 3% onto each employee, so it was like a flat thing. So,
Which is merit.
which we have,
Right.
right, we have a system in place. We're not saying do away with that. We just say we need to have, there's been a lot of discussion again here today that we need to have a workshop with HR. We need to include the administration and council to where we discuss this performance pool. We talk with Liz Groves, that we get a good system and we follow it. The problem was this time was there was some discrepancy in the budget. And when I want to call all that out, we just did the flat rate. We don't want to do away with, nobody's up here taking a vote to do away with performance evaluations. We're still going to do that. We're just having during this budget time where we did the motion was made to do the flat across the board.
I have a
So
question.
don't do away with the
So it
performance.
sounds like what you're saying is do the performance evaluation, use the tool to do the performance evaluation, but regardless of that evaluation, everybody's getting 3%.
I got a,
That's what I.
That's why I said.
That's what I heard
I got a
about.
question.
Is that what we're saying?
I got a question.
Why I brought
That's
this
why,
up.
the reason I asked the question earlier, we put the money there. So 3% across the board. If I'm the supervisor and I'm doing Ron's evaluation and he just has done a horrible job. He's not doing anything right. He won't take supervision whatsoever. Then just because there's 3% in his line item does not require the administration to give it to him. It allows
Well,
them
that
to.
was my
That's what
question.
we said.
Is it,
It depends on how, my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, Ron, I mean, my understanding at the last meeting, it was across the board, a 3% raise.
Everybody gets it no matter what.
Correct?
Right.
Yep.
That's currently what the administration is, as it is, that's
As-
what we're going to follow unless you want to do something different.
as opposed to compressing the maximum of 7% down to 3%?
Correct.
Right, because then the performance evaluation would still translate to a different percentage of a pay raise, but just 0 to 3%, as opposed to a maximum of
Right.
7%.
But
That's the other solution that is not currently in place.
We weren't talking about a 0 to 3%. We were talking about 3% across the board to all
That was
employees.
what I
At
wanted to
that
do.
workshop, so that's why I wanted.
But that's why I brought up this compromise, so we still have the system in place. It still gives the department heads to give, if that employee deserves a 3% or doesn't deserve it, it's still,
But it doesn't.
No,
It
that's not a.
doesn't. It doesn't. That's not.
Yeah,
In the
yeah, I mean,
Across the board, 3%.
Okay.
Are you asking
You're
to
not pointing
change?
at the
I was just, that, I didn't want to give a flat across the board and give an employee a 3% raise that's not deserving of a raise. So I thought maybe we could do a compromise to where the department head, rather than saying 3%, saying, Scott, I'm going to give you 3%, we all get 3%, and then his evaluation shows that he doesn't deserve the 3%. We're worried about the morale. So I thought we could do a compromise, but we don't have to, where the department head does not have to give across the board a 3% if an employee is not deserving of a raise
So you're
or
talking
less.
0 to 3 range.
Instead of a
Which
0
would
to 7,
require
you're
an
talking
amendment.
0 to 3.
Right,
Okay.
that's what that would be.
Which would require an amendment.
Workshops.
Not functional administration.
And if not, then we'll
Well,
just.
then
Well, I
I'd
think
hire
that's
Larry and
maybe
sue
where the
you.
division is.
That's
So,
exactly
I mean-
what I'd do. I'd hire Larry and sue you for not giving me the same amount as you did to other employees.
Oh, man.
So instead of
Well, I
0
think-
to 7%, you're just on 0 to 3%.
Correct.
I mean, I think
Until we
Which would
have.
be,
in regards to the morale issue, every decision that a department head has to make has to be founded in some sort of evidence. It's not, I mean, department heads can't say this person's getting a 7% raise for no reason. Now, while we can talk about the trust that we have with department heads and maybe not making up performance, I mean, that's an issue, but you're never going to get over human behavior, so I'm not even concerned with that.
that's not our
But-
issue to,
Well, so my point is that every decision that a department head makes, whether it's giving this employee 0% or 7%, is grounded in some sort of, in our current system, a performance evaluation or a conversation with our HR director. And so, I mean, I think that in terms of, if the issue is morale, I mean, I think that we have some things in place that can at least justify a department head's decision. And, I mean, honestly, I think that we're not talking about increasing the performance pool number, right? It's the same pool of money, just how it's divided up, and I think just keep it how we've been doing it.
Yeah,
So I'll be bold and
I'll
state my
piggyback.
opinion before anyone else, I guess, I don't know.
I'll-
But I mean, I think that our system is working. Maybe we test it out for another year. We have the understanding that we want to revisit maybe some of these issues with our consultant and our HR director. That's just my,
I would piggyback on that. I think if we're going to make a change, we need to do the work, which is have the meetings, do the research, get the advice of the administration and the consultant, and figure out what new policy we want to do, not the way we're doing it. Because, I mean, there are varying opinions on, you know, some feel that some pay grades, and I'm not talking about those that were in the budget, but there are some pay grades where people aren't getting paid enough. So there's a thought that maybe there should be, you know, a different type of raise. So all these things need to be taken into consideration, worked through to find out what the best solution is, I think, for the employees. So I think leaving it the way it is, the way it was presented, is the best option until we do the work and find out a better solution.
Madam President, may I say something as a elected official?
Mhm.
I personally feel that 3%, I think it should be 0 to 3% cap. And I'm going to, because my employees have always done the 0 to 3. I had no idea, of course, I'm not an administration part, that I could go up to 7%. I was never told that. So I think that the 0 to 3%, is how they do it at hospitals that I've worked at. You have a performance increase pool, you get 0 to 3%. It's according to how your revenue streams are and your money coming in. So to me, you know, if you're going to do 0 to 3%, I think that's basically the best way to do it. If not, I'd like to have it padded, more money put in my performance increase pool so
Well-
I can give an employee 7%.
but the 7% is coming from one pot of money.
Yes.
So because certain employees are getting maybe 0% raise or 1% raise, the extra 2% that was allocated to that employee can be allocated to another employee that requires.
We have had department
And
heads.
you are correct, excuse me, you are correct, but my performance increase pools have never reflected that, enough to give somebody that much.
Well, we have had department heads and supervisors and managers forego raises to pass on to their employees, and that's where that 3 to the 7% has come from.
I have a question.
Not that they've gotten an extra 7%.
I'm a little bit slow here to the game, but if I'm a department head, say this is my department and I'm a department head, and I get this performance pool, is the department head also a potential beneficiary of the performance?
3% is included.
Nothing, 7, nothing, now it can't go over $5,000, and it can't be more than 7%, which, if the department hits 60,000, that's only 4,200. You could give yourself a 7% raise up to $70,000. So, I see everybody's point here, and I take Callie's point in particular, but I think that may be a cause of a little bit of this problem, is that it's not that back to my example, that Scotty gets a 6% raise and Callie gets a 0. The fear, I think, is that you all will get however much it takes, because we've already seen their budget proposal and what they think their raise should be. That's where I can see both sides, but that's kind of where I stumble on this.
But I can't see a department head, and I don't know the exact processes from an HR standpoint, but that would require then that all 8 of our performance evaluations would say that this employee doesn't deserve a raise at all. So that would have to be justified, right?
That's what I mean when Kim said that the performance review and the raise amount, there isn't like a schedule to connect them. I heard, maybe I'm wrong, that it's pretty arbitrary. Yeah, I got your poor performance
They urged me
review.
to vote for Nathan Samuel, actually.
How does that play into what I say I give Scotty? I heard you say, correct me if I'm wrong, Kim, that process is pretty arbitrary.
To some degree, but there's a very detailed performance evaluation that you need to complete with the employee face-to-face to sit and have that discussion. And I can assure you that most folks who don't get a raise pretty much know why they're not getting a raise. And then we don't have department heads running around giving themselves 7% and not giving their employees anything. I can assure you of that as well. And if there are certain issues in budgets, I don't know, I haven't seen the budget. I didn't put extra percentages in the budget for my salary, and I don't know that any of my peers did that. So if that's happened, I'd hate to see everybody penalized because of something that might have happened that the rest of us aren't aware of.
For the department heads, does the mayor has to approve that?
Yes.
So it's not just them saying, okay,
No, the mayor has to sign off on that as well.
The mayor does the department head's performance
Yes.
evaluations personally. And
Yes.
Well, then where did we get these large increases that some of the department heads asked for?
Well, they requested it in their budget, but that doesn't mean that they
No.
would get it in a
That's
merit-based
separate
system.
from the
Okay,
performance.
stop. We're getting way over here again. I'm bringing it back in. The whole reason why the flat rate was decided upon, I'll say again, there was discrepancies in how it was budgeted. In order to be fair, a vote was taken for 3% flat rate. I have the calculations, I sent the spreadsheet, that's why it was done. We can't go back to the same way because it wasn't figured right. When one number's off, it takes them all off in the department, there was the whole thing, so we were just trying to be fair until we could have workshops with you. A lot of things need to be ironed out. We need to discuss things that weren't discussed even with this new council. So the question is, we have a motion that was voted on, 3% flat rate. That motion's already been reflected in the budget that we voted on, correct? To their 411. I just brought up, rather than the flat rate, a compromise to kind of address some of the, but not to the 7%, only to the 3%, only to give that little bit of room, because I don't want to be responsible giving an employee that did not deserve a raise just because we gave a flat rate. So there's the question. We either look at that, do a 0 to 3%, or we stay at the flat rate across the board motion that was already made and voted and approved down in minutes.
Or we can go back to the way it was.
That wasn't the motion. The motion was the flat rate against, with the 3%.
I understand what the budget says, but it can be changed to say whatever we want it to say.
I think we can
There are not
still-
just two options here.
I think we can still account for, so regardless of what policy you feel we should implement, we realized that some of the performance pool numbers were wrong. So those numbers have been corrected. As our current policy per ordinances and what we've been doing for the past, 5 or 6 years, we budget 3%, but then it's still up to the department head's discretion of 0 to 7%. So now that we've corrected, we know what the 3% number should be, we can move forward with the existing policy. I know we have a motion, so we would have to change what has already been voted on to revert back to the original policy, but I don't see that it's no longer being an option. I think we've corrected what the issue was in the first place.
Was it? Was the
my big-
spreadsheet that you?
I raised some of the questions initially because when I started going through the budget, this is the order of the budget was. The mayor was first, his department, not him. The department was first. The performance pool was wrong by a fair amount. Law was on the money. Public Works and Engineering was off.
And that was
Right down.
calculated by the total salaries
Police
times
was
3%,
off.
right?
Fire was off.
Okay.
Building Commissioner was off. Planning and Zoning. Then I just stopped.
Oh,
After
wow.
that, I'm like, almost every one, the dollar amount of increase that we put in there, which means you could give, there's more money. In theory, if you set the pool of money at 3% for that department, then in theory, the department head can't spend more than 3% on his people in increases. And that's what we always thought. But the first budget we got, it's been corrected now to the best of my knowledge, after Heather worked on it. But the first budget we got, there was more money in every department than 3%, except law. And like I say, I stopped after I said where I stopped. And so that's why I said, wait a minute, this is not the intent of what we were saying. We all said we're going to put this amount of money, 3%, in this bucket. And more money was put in that bucket. And so we said, well, how do we address that? How do we deal with that? So that was one of the questions that came up initially.
Was it just a miscalculation? Like, was the performance pool increased by 3% as well, and so that's where you see the difference? Or
No, I could say that there were some discrepancies in there. I did definitely noticed that the mayor's department was definitely wrong. Some of them might have been rounded up a little bit. I don't know how much you account for rounding.
Some examples I understand how it was done, but if there was a new employee put in, well, 3% of that new employee was also added. They just took their employees and did 3% on it. And so the first...
That's a limited time that I have,
Yeah.
but there's not been any time in the time that I've been here that the new employees, when they were hired on as new, have also gotten a 3% increase come January 1st. That money has always just been left in that performance increase pool account and not used. So it could very well have had that happen, yes.
Is the performance increase pool something that was set up previously by ordinance?
Yes, 2000, what's the ordinance number in front of you, Larry, that I,
2013-10.
So why don't we just follow the law?
and I want that back, by the way. Took me a while to find it.
We should just follow the law.
Who's that sound like?
Just a statement.
Just a statement, just follow.
So the saying, no good deed goes unpunished. I was trying to address some issues there, but we can just go back to that motion or not go back to the motion. I was just trying to, the motion that was made, try to do a compromise within that, so.
Is it possible to put the 3% of the total personnel line item, if you're trying to stick to the 3%, and whatever that personnel line item total, plus 3%? So if there's not a person, there's not a 3%, whereas if a personnel line item in that budget reflects the staff and the current salaries, and you add 3%, would that be?
That's what I did.
I think-
Okay.
There were new employees within that request.
Or maybe there was turnover, so there's different salary, like someone was hired and they have made a different salary than the person before them, so that would probably cause it to be off as well.
I went through the general fund and just took every 100 series line that was a salary that wasn't new and multiplied by 3% and calculated each individual line by 3% for each department's total performance increase pool, which I think has been done correctly since the first budget came out. I mean, it's not difficult to calculate what we would need in each department to be accurate. But, I mean, if we're looking for a way forward, I would make the motion that we go back to the performance increase pool with the same 0 to 7% range that we've had in recent years.
I'd second that.
You would, or do you?
Was that an actual motion?
Yes.
Okay. And then I did in fact second that motion.
So I got a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Which I'll start by saying is the whole thing was we didn't want to go up to the 7% because of some issues, wanted to go up to 3%, so I won't be voting for that. So, any further discussion?
One little comment. There's problems with this system, and you've told me that once this is all done, we're gonna address this
workshops
system,
and
we're gonna
manage
figure it
them.
out. So I would be for, just to get through this, to go ahead and do it the way we've been doing it, that like Matt and Callie proposed, for this year, just to get us through, and then we need to it looks like we need to relook at all of
And
this.
knowing that we do have 3%, an accurate 3% represented for the performance pool.
In each department. Right.
So, I guess I'm just saying I'm not too terribly happy about it, but I think to move the ball forward, let's do that, and then we'll rework. That's what I'm going to be for, to rework it after the fact.
So all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Aye. Did you get?
I'll take a roll call, please.
Councilperson White,
Aye.
Councilperson Sestobny,
Nope.
Councilperson Yon,
Aye.
Councilperson Maples,
Yes.
Councilperson Hawkins.
Yes.
Councilperson Gill,
No.
Councilperson Owen,
Yes.
Councilperson Ellis,
No.
Councilperson Samuel.
No.
All right, then motion does carry. So we can move on to that finally. Okay, so
So you'll just basically be changing the line item that is reflected in?
putting the accurate numbers.
What I
In
would
the
do for
prefer-
tonight, if it's all goes through tonight.
Sorry, I should have.
The difference of the yellows
You're just going to reflect the accurate 3%.
and put it down in the, yes.
All right.
Performance
Thank
Put
you.
it back, put the difference down in the.
Thank you in advance, Heather. I appreciate it.
And will the department heads then be under the mayors? Is that the intent, or the department stays in the department? I thought I heard somebody say that. Maybe I misheard
That
that.
does our performance.
Okay.
Is that in the ordinance?
Which means that department heads can't give themselves a 7% raise.
Well, they can recommend it, but then the mayor would have to approve it, right?
Right.
I mean, that's the way I
I think the
understand
mayor
it.
actually does the calculation for the raises though, right?
Does the mayor do the calculation for that, or does he
He does the
accept
performance evaluation.
what they say they want?
The money's
Well,
there.
Les does the calculation.
So whatever that percentage, it's my understanding, that it's the mayor's, those department heads are, unless the council gives these other raises, but in general, there will not be more than 3% raise.
Well, and one thing I'd like to discuss moving forward is department rate performance pool goes under the mayor. Let the mayor have control of it. Don't let it be in the same pot of money with the employees, and keep it separate. That's one thing I'd like to bring up in some future. I think that'll be fair. It's where it should be, under the mayor. He needs to approve it, and he has his money, and it'll all be up to him to decide, which is his decision, it's his department head. So I
One of
think
the-
that's one way
Write
we
that down for
can.
the workshop we're going to.
One of the things I'd like
Well, I'll
to
remember this
see is for the
discussion.
employees of the city of Jeff to organize and create a union. I would support that.
Okay. I think,
There's also some talk about having a flat, I mean, so this is just a part of the future discussion, I believe. I don't want to,
We got a limited time to get through today's discussion.
Move on.
let's go. Item 1.
Check.
I think that pretty much, with everything else that was, you just have to run upstairs then before, and put,
It doesn't change any of the totals.
Doesn't change.
don't change anything, so then we're good?
Well, I've got to have something.
Yeah, I mean, I'll change it. It's just that I don't know if you all want to discuss changing any of the totals.
Well, I know that a couple
Yeah, we
council
have some
members,
We're not
a couple
done by
council
any
members
means.
voted against the budget at our last meeting, so I think there's
That
probably
was
more
line
to
number 1.
discuss. Since some council, I don't think they voted against it for the performance pool.
I thought we were done back in September, whatever, but I'm
And then
just,
3 of us voted against the budget last council meeting. I mean, it was more than just the 3% blanket raises. It's being $500,000 in the hole and cutting police, and, we talked about raising revenues to make it look balanced. I mean, we got a lot to discuss in the next couple of hours before we're ready to say we're ready, before I'm ready to vote for anything. I don't know.
What's first?
I'll be honest, if anybody else wants to leave, go ahead, but
but I'm gonna tell you right now, we're keeping it on point because we've got to give her time to get it, okay.
Because I don't have.
She won't have to make any changes if the budget doesn't pass.
That we know of
so-
yet.
right?
So,
When we met last meeting, and looked through the budget that came out of that workshop, a huge list for me was, the $500,000 over the revenue and $100,000 that was cut from police overtime. And, if we can mitigate those 2 things, then, I can be okay. But, I went through just the general fund that was proposed from the mayor's office and found $150,000-ish in cuts I would propose, which would give us back our police overtime, but it still puts us $400,000 or $500,000 in the hole. So, eventually, we're going to have to bring this conversation back to health insurance and what we're going to plan to do with that.
Was the part of that 500,000 he's talking about in whole, was that not including, because we left the money in edit unappropriated to make up for that? Was that not the case?
Well,
So we're not really
they're still off
500,000 in the...
because as a council, we voted, the suggestion was made to balance the revenue and expenses, and that failed.
right.
So, and that was 7 o'clock, I think, and we went directly into the meeting. So I don't think we ever had a proposed solution because our numbers were still off.
So $500,000 over revenue in the general fund could be partially offset by the $450,000 out of edit, but the workshop group didn't vote to appropriate that for health insurance. We can appropriate $400,000 in edit as a transfer for health insurance.
That's what I was asking her, but I didn't get a chance to get an answer from her.
We can.
That will be the 500,000 gap if we do that, because we didn't, it was unappropriated, because we ran out of time. If we appropriated that 400,000 out of edit, does that go towards what he's talking about, the $500,000 in deficit?
Well, we would just reduce the expenses out of the general fund by the 400,000, and that would get us within 100,000 of being balanced.
That's what I just asked.
Yes, sorry.
Question or comment? At our last meeting and at previous budget meetings, different council members have said multiple times vehemently that we're going to bring in more money than we budget. We have the last X amount of years.
Mm-hmm.
And at the last meeting, we were told even before then that our health insurance is going up, and we know that. At the last meeting that we had, Mr. Merkley, as well as as Heather, stated that the revenues were conservative, and we could raise the revenues and feel safe and comfortable. Those are not my words. Those are Heather's words. Why?
I said that you could raise the revenues if you'd like, and that there are some numbers that could definitely be adjusted, but I have always had them estimated at a conservative amount.
Right. But you felt they would be realistic?
Some of them, yes.
Yes, okay. At least that's the way I took that. So why would, if the council members that have said, we know we're going to bring in more money, let's just put it on paper, and that solves our problem. My big concern is if we do not budget for our health insurance, it leaves the high water mark, if you will, for our insurance appropriations down here. It doesn't increase it like it's supposed to. Well, in 2019, the high water mark is going to keep going up. It will not go down. It does not go down. And so then that gap gets larger every year. We need to have a placeholder, because what happens is if we don't spend the money here, it'll get spent somewhere. There'll be a need in the city somewhere, and that money will be spent by a department, and then we can't, the next year, it's almost impossible to pull that money back because they get used to living on their new high water mark. And so if the administration was kicking and screaming and saying, no, don't do that, but if the council, members on the council feel like the revenue, and our history has shown our revenue is more than our projections, and then we have the finance person and the administration saying we can increase that and feel okay, as long as we're all on the same page and we're watching it. I don't know why we wouldn't do that, versus leave the insurance line at a low water mark, because that will bite us, or whoever's at the table, because that's going to keep going up. That's just my thoughts.
And that's why I was asking for distinction at the last meeting. Correct me if I'm wrong. What Heather was saying is that we have the power to just raise the revenues. She's sticking with her number.
No, I mean, I didn't take it that she said we have I know we have the power to do whatever 5 votes will do. But my question to Heather last time specifically was, you've been very conservative, which is appreciated. Is there room to increase that? And the answer was yes. I didn't give her a number to say, I need you to increase this line, this line, this line by this much. I asked the question. I asked the question of the administration. And again, it's not that, if you took a poll of the council members, most of the folks that are against this right now have said themselves, our revenue is going to come in higher. They've said that. And now they're saying, oh, we don't want to project the revenue any higher. So I just want to verbalize that.
What are you verbalizing that,
Well, I
what
think-
projection are you looking at? Because if we do the appropriate the edit, which we didn't get a chance to do, that came into discussion, to put that towards, so we're not, right now we're showing 500,000 in the red, so to speak. So are you talking about using that 400,000 from edit and then just in the revenue the 100,000, or looking at the budget to get what are you proposing to?
Personally, I would be very hesitant to tag edit for our health insurance, because once we do, it's going to be hooked. And in 19, it's going to be almost impossible to de-hook that. We're going to have to get the same amount. We're just kicking the can. And so my proposal is for finance, the administration, and council, if some of the council wants to get it involved, it doesn't really matter. Look at our revenue and say, legitimately, where are we very conservative? Where can we raise? And what is that dollar amount? I don't know the exact dollar amount. So that's my thing.
Well, then to leave the edit unappropriated, but it'll still be there though if we need, but we still have, if we raise the revenue, because I remember I don't know if it was the first or second year I was on the council, I remember because of health care, right off the bat, we took $1 million out of reserves in our budget and put it in our budget to meet the health care. Do you remember that? Was that our first year or second year we were on there? So I want to do the revenues, what you feel comfortable in doing, we could raise it a little, and where we're short, we'll have to come up with something to do there, but I don't want to, but you're not proposing raise it 500,000,
Maybe,
maybe?
What is, I
maybe.
mean.
I don't know what that number is.
Like,
I'm
I don't
not the
expect you
finance
to know,
person.
Heather, but like, what is that number? Like, what is the neighborhood that number will live in?
Which number?
What they're saying is, everything was, revenue numbers were conservatively approached. How much could they be raised and still be?
If we could compare the last 3 years, 4 years, whatever, to see what our budget was versus what the actual was, that would be some trend that says budget was here, actual came in always at, or on the average, 7% more, 10% more, whatever that is. That is what I would be comfortable with doing, moving it up to. 'Cause that's
I'd like
based on.
to clarify that I'm one of those people that have said our revenues always come in higher, our revenues always come in higher. And the point of saying that is, I was advocating for using reserve funds for a capital project, not additional operating money. Our revenues come in higher to replenish those reserves that we could potentially use on a capital project one time, not put in a fund for operational uses that we're going to have to depend on year after year in perpetuity. So yes, I've been one to say that our revenues do come in higher. We should always hope that our revenues come in higher. I don't think we should be spending every dollar or we should be budgeting every dollar that comes in. And I think there's a key difference there in budgeting every dollar for operational, purposes and budgeting a little bit more for a one-time capital expense that after we've made that expense, those additional funds can replenish our reserves.
Yeah, but you also said about you've got issues with, there was a vote to do the 100,000 in police overtime, and you didn't like that, so you don't want that on the table, so you came up with another 100,000, correct?
Right.
Does anybody else have any other?
I'll just make a comment too. You talk about health insurance. If you look at 2013, 2014, 2015 in health insurance, what we've done is over budget in that line item because we weren't sure what the circuit breakers were going to do. And then at the end of the year, we had money left over that rolled over into 2015 and 2016. Is that true, from your knowledge?
Health insurance?
Yeah. We've had balances carry forward from 2013, 2014, 2015.
In the health insurance bank account, yes.
Yep. And so now we have, because over time, our hires and cost of insurance has caught up to that balance, and we're surpassing it. So that's why when you look back into our health insurance, you're saying, well, we've always over budgeted in the past. This might just be a one-time or two-time situation. It's not. This is accumulated over time, and I think, unfortunately, this is the new norm. So it is an operational expense we're going to have to figure out. Now, we could have a good year and be a couple $100,000 less, but I think the trajectory is clear. This is the new norm that it's going to cost more for health insurance for the city. So we have to consider it an operational expense that's increased quite a bit, and it's going to continue moving forward.
I agree with having to budget it, but when you say we've over budgeted, Vicki and I worked really hard when we were trying with the numbers and meeting with all of them, and what we would always budget was always cut, and then it's always added right back in. Is that not correct?
Yeah, and we've never known what the budget was of the health insurance bank account, to know what was in there when it came time for budget time.
I think the administration increased, their request reflects an increase of 1.5 million.
It wasn't the administration, it was Lisa.
What?
That increased the insurance revenue.
Yeah, yes.
And the budget submitted by the mayor, whoever did it.
No, I
No,
submitted,
the mayor
the
submits.
budget work, that's under council. I submitted that worksheet.
All right. So it's increased by 1.5 million, the original budget that we received. So we do have an increase already. So maybe we can increase it a little bit more, but I think we should
That was prior
stick with the conservative budget estimates that we have. And I would echo what Matt said, that I do anticipate that we will have more than we expect, and that's a good thing.
That's what,
And we're not going to spend $6 million by May. So,
So if revenues climb, like we hope that they do,
right,
we appropriate it when they climb.
right. Smart budget.
So
Well,
last
not
year, I know that there was
Last year.
4.5 million that was budgeted for health insurance. And we appropriated, is it 1.2 additional to cover health insurance last year, I believe.
Right, we're up to
Which would be-
we're up to 5,750,000
5.7 million is
this year.
what we expect to have spent in 2017. So we are increasing that number by 300,000 for the watermark that currently exists in the budget, because there's 6 million that's budgeted. Is that correct? Okay. So, Nathan, I think you brought up a good point about setting that watermark. Knowing that it's always difficult to increase that because you're going to have to pull away from other funds that constantly spend. I feel good that has increased 1.5 million since our last budget, and the it's part of council budget, but theoretically the entire budget was revenue neutral. So that had to come from somewhere, that 1.5 million, correct?
Yeah, but
And then there's also, we appropriated 1.2 million additionally last year that we will likely not have to appropriate toward health insurance for this coming year.
It's encumbered in that high water mark.
I'm sorry, as in 2017.
It brings it to the 5.75 total.
Right.
Right.
So assuming that we don't have to appropriate 1.2 million for health insurance next year, that won't exist, basically. That's being cut out.
If it's budgeted at 6 million,
Right.
yes.
Okay.
But I think, what Vicki said before she had left, the situation is the administration submitted their budget to us before we got the health renewal cost.
Yes.
So I actually do believe, knowing that Les has been on the council, and you can correct me if I'm wrong because you're sitting right there, had you known the health renewal cost increase, you sat in the same meeting that I did, that your budget would look a little different. You would have anticipated some sort of increase. So we keep going back to talk about what the administration, but the administration made the budget before we got the health renewal increase. That's what I'm trying to, it's not funny. It's exactly what happened. How is that funny, Mr. White?
Don't question me.
I am questioning you because I'm bringing up the point, we
I'm
got
not
a
responding to
budget.
your question. Don't have personal attacks, Madam President.
Personal attacks, but you can sit there and laugh at me while I'm making a statement. We did not have this budget submitted to us before we got the health renewal cost. So that's the big question. Am I right or am I wrong?
That's my understanding of the fact.
Okay. So we have this additional, because of our health renewal cost, and because of the insurance committee meetings and all that, Heather gave us the 6.8, which is the 82%, right?
Yes.
So the question is, which we already have a vote that was made to budget the 6.8. So the question is, how do we get there or not get there, whether we have to adjust revenues or if we have to do a different motion like we did the first time around, but right now there is a motion that stands and reflects in the budget that we budget 6.8. Keep wanting to reverse it.
Let me just add one more thing about health insurance. I know it keeps going on, but worst case scenario, let's say we have a terrible year again next year. We have an exposure of a possible $500,000 above the 6.8. So worst case scenario, it comes in at 7.3 million. Just saying. It's been a long time since we hit our max, but it could happen.
Which would be similar to what we appropriated this year, additionally. If it's budgeted 6 million,
If we did
worst case
6.8,
scenario.
it'd be an additional 5 million above that.
Right, so, but what's currently budgeted is 6 million, so the worst case scenario is 7.3, which is
Yes,
1.3 over.
Yep.
Which is what we additionally appropriated this year.
Which is what we just managed without much of an issue in 2017.
I mean, I think it makes sense that I think it makes sense that we look for places in the budget to cut, and I think all of that money that we cut should go in our health insurance fund. I think if we're a few $100,000 off, I would prefer just to wait and see how the numbers are before, instead of changing our revenue item. I mean, if it's off a couple $100,000, then in my opinion, 6.6 million, that's a lot better than what is currently budgeted. I'm one of the council members that says, we always can expect to have more in our funds than what we expect. Personally, maybe it's just because I'm a new council person, but increasing the revenue sounds a whole lot scarier to me and concerning, and it's just not something that I'm comfortable with, and it might be totally harmless, but in my mind, changing that side of the equation is a lot different than changing the expense side of the equation. So that's where I'm coming from. I just don't feel comfortable. I also don't feel comfortable appropriating edit for health insurance, and I've been vocal about that. I don't feel comfortable cutting police overtime because we know that expense is going to be there, but we have decisions that need to be made, so.
Well, I appreciate that, and just to respond, I think the reason I feel so strongly about it is we had our insurance agent. He spoke with me directly. Hopefully, he spoke with everybody. He told me we need to budget higher, and he not only him. I wasn't part of this meeting, but the meeting that took place with HR was there. Humana was there. They're our insurance people, the professional people that know. Every one of them were telling us, you gotta be higher, and they gave us an approximate amount. And for me to say, for me not to adhere to that and listen to that, I don't think I'm doing my due diligence. As my whole role on the council is supposed to be dealing with the money, and that's what I'm trying to do. And it's a philosophical difference potentially, which I respect. That not a problem, but I just feel like whenever all the professionals are aligned and they're saying this is what you need to do, and we're saying, well, we'll look at it later in the year. I can't do
And
that.
they were aligned knowing that we had 6 million already budgeted. That was the point I was trying to.
Well, if we listen to what your president is doing, then there's no doubt that the insurance companies are all going to raise their rates. And with that coming towards us, we've got to make a decision as to where we're going to go from here. Are we going to put the revenue or put the money needed in now, or are we going to put it in later? That's the bottom line.
I think if we look at raising it 1.5 million, maybe adding a couple of 100,000, then waiting to see how the claims come in, then we'll know. And we meet twice a month, so we'll know, we'll get a sense of how it's working, and then we'll know if we need the extra money or not.
Does the administration have a position? Because it's been repeated that $6 million was put in before our estimates came in. So now that the estimate's in, what would the administration like to see done?
Well, I can't speak for the mayors. I've not spoken to the mayor, but I think at the last meeting I gave three or four ways out of this trick bag. I don't see where you can cut out of this budget $511,000 without having a negative impact on employees and city services. Therefore, why is not to fund the full amount for health insurance? I mean, I think the administration, we have to stick with the number that we were given. So I think at least I look at, this is my 15th budget. You're working off $32 million estimated revenues for next year projected. 511,000 that equals like 0.5%. Also, it's my understanding, Heather, in the budget proposal for the council, we did not account for any increase in income taxes, correct? Because in 2020, that's all going to change. But in reality, you are going to see more income tax revenue next year that's not reflected in that budget. We just did not want to budget for it because at some point
It's going to change because of the levy change.
you know,
So you said you'd stick with the number you were given.
I think if we were in a situation, if we were preparing this budget and we were given the number on the health insurance, we had to do the budget, I think we would have increased revenues and maybe not have funded health insurance to the full amount that we requested. Combination there. The reality is, I mean, I don't see where you can cut $511,000 on the budget, so you've got to find it another way, which means you've got to increase your revenue.
And I agree with that. That was one of the recommendations I made, was increase revenue a couple $100,000, decrease the insurance a couple $100,000, try to make up the difference, and that was voted down. But we can put that back on the table if that's a scenario. The majority would like to go.
And I'm with, you aren't alone, Ms. Young, with the not liking to move the revenue number. However, there's conservatively budgeting, and then there's conservatively budgeting. I'd like to know how much space, still calling it a conservative budget, how much is that amount? Like, that's really would be my question, and I know that would be hard to figure sitting here. Is there a couple $100,000? Okay.
More?
And to let you know, when we prepared the budget, I mean, the revenues that we used were the revenues that entered campuses. Actually, the administration, we usually go and say, decrease this number so we can do X, Y, and Z. We have to do that, so.
Well, if it sounds like a majority is raising revenues, I still have to advocate against cutting the police overtime budget. And we haven't talked about that, but we just...
Well, they have,
I don't know if there's a
600,000 right
majority
now.
in favor of raising revenue.
I don't know if there is or not, but she's doing some figuring, so I thought I'd bring it up. It's,
Do you have the 150,000 in proposed cuts?
I do, but they're based on the mayor's proposal, not on what came out of the committee. So, I don't know how it compares. So if we're looking at
What committee are you referring to?
the workshop,
Oh, okay.
the workshop that's already been approved on the first reading.
Help explain
Who's
to
the
me
items?
about the 100,000, since it sounds like we're going to talk about the police while we're killing time.
Right.
So the 100,000,
Sidebar.
I spoke, this is, of course, you got to go back 2 meetings, so I know
Right.
things have transpired. What is it that has transpired between then and now? Because when I spoke with the chief, he felt as if that 100% reduction was in line with reality. He did not. And I asked, point blank asked him, this is what we're thinking about doing, I need to hear from you, and he had no problem with it. Then, has something transpired
Well-
between then and now?
The Tuesday after the Monday workshop, I talked to all the department heads, and I was kind of on the same line as you, but I believe that there was other conversations after that. I think that's why you're bringing up your concern.
When we got to a department head meeting on Wednesday morning, you could tell that there were several department heads not happy with what had transpired Monday before. And the chief made a point to come up to me and say, we cut 100,000 out of my overtime, but my overtime is impacted by the raises we just gave to the base, the changes in the shift differential, and the raises to rank. And he was frustrated, visibly frustrated, that we would cut overtime after we've given raises that directly impact overtime. So I'm not saying he didn't tell you he was good with it, but when he spoke with me, it was a much different tone.
And so when we were in contract negotiations, we were very specific about this will not affect overtime, or will this affect overtime. So I thought we had a good little handle on that, but I don't know.
Heather looks done with numbers, just saying.
The point that I think was made was that, well, if we run out of overtime, the chief can come and ask for more overtime. And I don't understand why we would have him do that. He's told us what he thinks he needs, but
Because it's
It's
100.
all a moving target. I mean, it's the same thing with with the
Every
health
number is
insurance.
not what it
So
seems.
why should we cut the health insurance if we think we're going to need more later? The difference is, when the chief comes up, it looks like the chief can't manage his budget, when really, we've cut him $100,000, and nobody remembers that from 8 months ago.
Oh, I'll make sure that people remember if that was the case,
If
because I
it's-
was very clear with him that it was the understanding, just like with fire, had to come now. We understand, because especially Chief Hedrick with his situation. I know one year is because of he's been excellent about showing what it affected that overtime. They have so many good years and bad years where even this year, the $600,000 would be adequate, or he may need that extra $100,000 requested. With the police and fire, they have injuries, they have babies, they have different things that affect that, but when you're saying about the contract raising it, then there's some, we were very, and there was, us are all here that were on the negotiation team, we were very adamant about the numbers that affected OT. Are we not?
But,
You are,
I mean, you know, when you give somebody a raise, it's going to affect OT. That's,
Right.
I mean, I think that was a given, you know, and when we give more money
but what
on a daily basis, that's obviously going to equate to more money in the overtime budget.
But wasn't he requested, I might be wrong,
What's the change?
150,000 more. And we said yes to 50,000 more to cover those, what we're talking about here with like natural increase of things. So, is that right?
No, I got, that's 450 last year, and he requested 550 this year.
And what was it last year?
450.
450.
But was that after an additional?
we gave him $600,000 last year. We cut it?
Well, if there was an additional appropriation, it would be even worse,
Right.
because
Then we're back to
it would
that
be
high
higher
level.
than 450 of what was spent last year.
I don't agree with cutting 100,000 out of the overtime out of the police. That's one thing I'm on agreement with Matt on, is in today's world, security and police is the cost of doing business, and just as Ed said, you know, healthcare is going to go up.
Yeah.
Security's going to go up for the city. It's just, that's the world we live in nowadays.
Overtime is kind of like what you said, Matt, you have some good years and you have some bad years, but you can get an estimate, and that's his estimate, and it's probably his best estimate. And he could have a better year, could have a worse year. Where do you want to move it from? That was just one of the pots that we thought was a flexible one that we could move. I don't think anybody rips on the chief, I hope not. I mean, I think they've been doing a good job trying to manage their overtime and manage everything.
Yeah, I just feel that there will be additional appropriations in this, and we've already had some people speak clearly about not doing any additional appropriations
Next year at all.
And I've always seen, I'm telling you, in my council years, I've always seen additional appropriations. It's just, you got to make a judgment about what seems reasonable, the amount and the line items, and say yes and no, and yes and no, and move on. But you try to make your budget your best you can, but as we're seeing here, it's a moving target. You have some good years, you have some bad years, you have weather emergencies, you need a whole bunch of salt, you don't need any salt.
And the majority of what we cut out of last year or the year before, they ended up getting it right back.
Just got to make our best judgments. Let it roll.
So if I may, consideration.
I think we're all arguing the same points for different line items.
Yeah.
Insurance claim.
It's all
whether it's
moving.
in the budget or not. So what you budget zero, but you're obligated to pay that, so you
Right.
have to pay it. And you're going to have to pay people who come to work. So in some respects, I respect everything you all are saying, trying to do what you're trying to do, but
Right.
you
All of
certainly
it.
have an obsolete budget.
Which brings me back to where a motion was made to get the 100,000, which he said that he's found an additional to make up for that.
Well, I didn't say I found an additional. I said I found 150,000 out of the mayor's proposal.
Well, additional is probably, that's wrong.
My only fear is that we don't recognize an expense that is likely or may occur, and then we wake up a year from now going, oh my gosh, we just lost, we're going to have to pull $1 million out of something or out of reserves and set ourselves up for a continuing situation where we're pulling a couple $100,000 or $1 million because we didn't recognize the trend that changed, the increased trend that had changed. And with us hiring more people and having older workforce and whatever, all the good things we're doing in the city, But there's additional expenses that are happening. Cost of doing business.
But if we kept revenues the same, and let's say increase it to 6,200,000, and then make the other cuts, then we have a balanced, if not a revenue neutral surplus budget. And we're not then spending money somewhere else, we're then waiting to see how much we're going to need. I mean, again, we meet twice a month, so, we can monitor it as we go forward.
Heather, do you have numbers for us?
I see three, potentially. Under building permits, could potentially increase by 50,000. Zoning variances could potentially increase by 20,000. And then interest could go up about 150,000. I think we're doing quite good on that.
So that's 220.
Yeah, 220 total. The questionable ones, which is other, vary from all over the board, and reimbursements, refunds and reimbursements. So those two, I don't really want to.
So you're not talking about raising the estimated property tax then?
No.
You're talking about raising fees and...
Right.
Yes.
Miscellaneous revenues is what I
Yes.
thought y'all were talking about, was raising miscellaneous revenues.
Anywhere.
Raising our revenue. So right now, you're saying you feel comfortable with raising it at
220.
220,000.
In the general fund. And then we can see how it goes throughout the year.
And the offset is what, 511?
Which is from, I think, the
the
cuts
number
that were
we're
made in
trying
that
to-
workshop.
That was the number,
I
511?
think so.
Yes.
And I would, to move us on, I'd make a motion that we adjust those revenues $220,000, and then we would we would increase health line item to 6.5. Isn't that
That'll get us
We already
close.
have it at
isn't it 6?
5, I think.
We have it at
Okay.
6.8.
Yeah.
Is what, I think
Yeah.
that motion was approved.
Is that your motion then?
Well,
You wanna make a
I thought that,
Budget.
did we have to come up, I was thinking we had to come up with a
511.
511, but the health insurance was still at 6. So it's at 6.8?
Yes.
6.8.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's why we're red 511.
So, okay. So then what? Then
You're suggesting increasing revenue 220 and then decreasing health insurance 280 or whatever, 291.
yeah, it's at, 6.5.
Yeah.
Right? Well,
Whatever gets to
300,000. I just got to
Whatever
reduce it.
gets to
I need the
511.
number. But yeah, whatever. If we want to be exact to the penny, I'm fine with that. But if it's at 6.8, if we take 3 off of that, and then we raise 220, that's your 520. That's my motion.
Then I'll entertain a motion because there was already a motion that reflect that where we budgeted the 6.8. So you will now make a motion to budget healthcare for 6.5?
In an effort to compromise, I'm reducing 6.8 to 6.5 and increasing revenues to what she just said.
And we can do that all in one motion and one, okay.
Just,
And that means we won't be doing anything with it. We won't be committing any edit funds.
That's correct.
towards it.
so, and just that, so that means that with the 511 number that we're still looking for, that at that workshop, 288,000 roughly was cut, of which 100,000 was from police overtime. Is that correct? The 288 that's already been cut that we're looking for
So we still have that.
was from 100,000 of overtime?
Yeah, the issue-
And then the salaries, right?
Overtime issue.
So we still have the
that
overtime
issue.
Okay.
So let's handle this motion first.
Okay.
and
I know, I just,
then we'll deal
well,
with.
before I vote on that, I want to make sure that I'm comfortable with the 511 number
Okay,
and where that was
gotcha,
coming from.
gotcha.
So, okay, thank you.
So the 20,000, I want to mess her up.
I'm sorry.
I didn't want to mess you up.
So we have the 511,702.
Mhm.
We're gonna subtract 220, which is the extra revenue. So, or, it's plus sign, sorry, excuse me. So now we're at 291,702. And then you're going to decrease the health insurance by 300,000. So that gives you
A balance of 82.98.
The question,
$1,298, yes.
the question I have is the $20,000 you identified in miscellaneous. Was that from planning and zoning?
Zoning variances, yes.
Is that some of the funds that were going to be used to pay for the new employee?
I don't think the new employee was in the budget.
Well, they took the new employee out of the budget.
Which new employee?
This is
The
just a
zoning.
comfortable estimate with what will likely be brought in with variances next year, correct?
Yep.
That leaves us with a surplus of 82?
There's also
Yep.
another account that has the zoning, planning and zoning licenses and permits. That's another account that we'll have too. But I know that they have
No, I-
significantly increased.
I'm gonna die for the lack of a second.
No, I didn't.
I know there's a
I didn't get
discussion, but I'll second your motion just to throw it out there so you know it's not dying for a lack of a second, so.
Okay. So I got the motion and the second to take the healthcare to the 6.5 and raise the revenue to 220,000. Any further discussion?
Yes. So if I understand correctly, we're looking at 82,980?
No, 8,298.
Oh, 8,298.
$8,298.
Okay.
In the black, maybe.
Over there.
Yeah.
All right. So if we go down to 6.4, then we can restore the police overtime, or what do we do with that?
Right.
We're going to deal with that after this.
I'm asking the question. I just want to make sure I understand.
It could be a motion.
Yes, right now we don't have a way to deal with the overtime.
Okay. But right now, the motion is to reduce it to 6.5.
And raise the revenue to the 220. So all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Aye.
I think it was Matt and Dustin were the only two, okay.
Yep.
So then the motion passes. So now we'll move on to the overtime discussion.
One of the things, since we're going to discuss police overtime, the first thing I would like to bring up and make us all aware of is the craziness of the times. You know, one event could blow the police overtime out of sight. With as crazy as people are now, and with all the events that we have on the river and Big Four Park with huge crowds, it would take one deranged person to create a problem and make the police overtime really go out through the roof. So before you take that money away from them, I think that we need to look at why we're providing it for them.
I have an indirect question. Did we ever get clear, I have a question mark next to the contractual services that's in police. It's an increase of 75,000. And I have question mark, and then I have radios and maintenance written, and I'm not, did we get clarification of what those contractual services are? Or, that's a large increase, and I'm not confident with my notes that I jotted down.
Which one is that?
It's about halfway through page 3, and it's contractual services. We budgeted 75,000 last year, and now we're budgeting 150,000.
Let me see.
Do I not have an updated budget? Is that no longer there?
No, I don't have what you were looking at.
So right here, contractual services, and there's an increase in 75,000.
And what was your notes?
I had radios
Radios,
and maintenance.
maintenance.
That's kind of what I jotted down.
For some reason, they went, we just did a couple of contracts for them, for the radios. They have two sets, two types. They have the computer system radios, or the computer system and the radios, and I think that's what it was for.
So we're expecting an increase because of new equipment?
The surveillance rooms or the,
Yeah.
something about the
Evidence.
system or something.
So it's like a new contract that we're expecting to, that
I don't
budget
think
to
it's
double?
new, I think it's add-ons to contracts they have, plus the additional for the surveillance parts. That's my recollection, but I could be,
And I should have called the chief prior to now, but I was just looking through my notes one more time and saw that, so.
Heather, I don't have it in front of me, I don't think. For this year, will the police use 100% of their budget? Is there any that could carry over for the, I'm sorry, the overtime line item? That,
I would have no idea on that.
didn't bring that.
Anybody, I might have missed this, performance increase pool went up 17,000 in the police budget.
Sorry.
Performance increase, what,
Some of the,
civilian employees?
yes. Well, but the chiefs had to go in there too.
Okay.
Because they're not under the contract.
Okay.
And there's,
I just, there was only 575 in there last year, and there's
Yeah.
17,000 this year.
They have 84,000 left in the budget right now. They spend about 55,000 a month.
so they're gonna spend it all and then some. Okay. I was just wondering if we could carry some over, but no.
And, okay. Do you have the running total for what we are for overtime, like with additional appropriations and things for police for 2017? I'm not sure, that's why.
Looks like they had budgeted 596,000.
Okay.
Is that in my packet? That's in the packet.
no, that's.
So since it was 450, well, but then there's 150 for special events. Is that all together?
Never mind.
No, here's the overtime count.
Okay.
The special events
Was 150?
has 36,000 left in it, and it was at 150.
So the 596, it was budgeted 450, so we've increased that account 146,000 from what was originally budgeted.
Tell me, what account number?
Account,
What was the name again?
just overtime. So I'm seeing 2017 budgeted was 450,000, but you said the number was 596.
Yes.
So that budget has increased 146,000 from what's budgeted already, if we look at last year's.
Yes. Because we did an additional.
So we're spending roughly, we're expecting to spend probably 600,000 in overtime this year.
Yes.
Okay.
Last year, we spent 717,000.
I saw that 2017 number. Yeah, okay.
Hey Heather, you know how there was a change in the pensions with fire and police?
Pensions?
Yeah, wasn't it the pensions that they reduced our factor that we had to pay?
The impress amount? Yes.
Yes. Is that reflected in next year's budget? Did you decrease that amount moving forward?
They calculate that, and I've been told that that was calculated correctly.
Because, I mean, didn't they ask to use, what was it, the fire department asked to use those extra proceeds for something this year? They bought a new vehicle or something?
The police department, I know, just transferred that, you all approved that.
Okay.
And that was due to not hiring as early on in the year as,
Yeah, but they said that was part of the factor, but the other factor was the change in the calculations. But so moving forward, that they reduced that factor appropriately? Because I guess what I'm saying is that could be put back into the general fund rather than being,
they said that the budget is the way that it should, I mean, it's budgeted correctly for 2018.
okay, thank you.
Some of that was also transferred to some of the other accounts like the HSA, you know,
Right.
or other things for this year, so. it's
Good.
not-
Perfect. I just want to make sure that happened. Thank you.
So with respect to the discussion to where the 100,000 for the police, so if we leave it in the budget, what do we do to
I say we move
offset it?
the health insurance to 6.4, and then move that to the insurance.
To the police.
Yeah, to the overtime.
It's a horse apiece. We're talking about moving numbers, we're talking about
That does
reevaluating.
split the 800,000 increase straight down the middle. If we want to talk about compromise. Is that a motion? Because I seconded it.
It is.
The motion was to change the insurance to 6.4,
Yes.
and what was the other, was that, what was,
And then use the 100,000 for the police overtime.
so I got a motion and a second, is there any further discussion?
Are there any other options on the table for where that could come from?
For cutting, I mean,
That maybe,
I think this budget actually cut more than the 150 that I was going to propose, which allows us to get further up to 1.4. I was only getting, or 6.4.
okay.
I was only getting us to 6.4.
Which I know we all have a difference of opinion, but when we just said that 100,000 to cut, just to put it back, because that's, I guess with the, which do we do? Do we cut the insurance or do we cut the police salary and add it back in? Because either one, we're going to be adding back in.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say. is-
So it's the same thing, just that.
When the health insurance claim happens, we're going to have to pay for it, and when the overtime happens, those guys work those hours, we're going to have to pay it. So we can move, we move it wherever we like.
Exactly. And the police chief submitted a budget based on the contracts that we signed, or that we approved. And I think that's accurate. It saves him the trip of coming before us to ask for another 100,000. What's the purpose in that? If we need to add 100,000 in the healthcare, it's something we just do. So I think that's more appropriate. I think that, yeah, so.
I have a
Question,
comment, I guess, or maybe a suggested idea. Our Lloyd Lit is the fund that we know it's going to continue to grow because of River Ridge, because of all the growth in job. It's based on payroll. It can pay for safety. Rather than paying for overtime personnel out of that, there's a number of line items in the 400 series, which is typically the capital type purchases under the police, a number of them.
But Nathan, keep in mind that with the county getting their levy back, we're not getting our extra in
those
the Lloyd.
increases.
We won't get those in the
We'll
Lloyd.
increase.
Let me finish, and then we can be shot down. I'm getting used to that.
Yeah.
If
I think we all are.
if we take, I think we could find 100 grand out of that, pay for it out of that, shift those costs to Lit, and put the overtime in his budget and pay for that out of general, but pay for the 400 series stuff out of Lit. It's
So currently we have a little over 2 million in lit for surplus funds, is that what you're referring to?
I'm
According
not
to our
even
12
looking
line?
at that. I'm not even looking at that. I just know our lit is continuing, every year will continue to grow. I don't know the full cap, what's going to happen with that. But I'm just suggesting, instead of cutting an expense that we know is going to be, we feel is going to be there, both those expenses we talked about, let's just use our money that's in lit.
Yeah.
Because it's earmarked for, that's what it can be used for. And I can tell you, if we don't use it, then there's going to be a special need to use it, for a request to use it. And to me, I think this could be priority, making sure we get the overtime in. So that's just a little twist of a different way to look at it.
Okay, so right now, though, we have the
Got a motion
motion
on it?
and the
All right, I
second
got
on the, for that. So all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed?
Aye.
No,
Hey,
I'll just say, I like Nathan's
I like
suggestion.
Nathan's too.
what's the difference in using Lloyd and edit?
In bold.
Nathan.
Because Lloyd,
We just use the edit, yeah, exactly, no.
I have a question about, who knows, can anybody speak with certainty, where did the Ferris wheel stop when it comes to how they are going to affect our LOIT? Like, doesn't that start taking place in 19 or 20?
2020.
20, that's when it begins, is that correct?
and what's going to happen is we'll still have an increase, just not as much of an increase as we've had in years prior.
Okay. But not until 20.
Right, we won't be
Yes.
getting that extra, so to speak.
Now, traditionally, couldn't find it before the vote was called, we use the LOIT for things like uniforms and vehicles and equipment. It's not something we've used for operations.
Which
Yeah, and he mentioned using it for the
We have for
400 series.
additional appropriations in the past, we have.
so I think he mentioned
All those items.
freeing money from the general fund for uniforms or whatever,
Yes.
Right.
equipment.
All those items, Dustin, are what we call 400 series. It's a supply, it's equipment, supplies like, and it's a bunch of them say supplies or like bike patrol supplies, whatever. I'm just saying shift those, or $100,000 worth of them, over to just same heading of the line, item and everything, just move that under lit. And then adding the 100 back in.
What lit are you talking, edit?
No.
What you're saying?
Well,
Talking about LOIT?
Lowett Public Safety?
did that change? Or is Lloyd?
Lit just
They combined.
That's what I thought. I'm talking about using the original Lloyd. That's what I'm talking about.
The Lowett Public Safety?
Public, yeah.
Okay.
And I did say the word safety earlier. I know I said that. So,
I just was getting a little confused.
okay. So,
And have we used that for overtime in the past?
we're not using it for overtime. That's what I'm saying. Leave overtime in the general fund. Leave it under,
Shift his, some other,
Move $100,000 of police capital purchases to Lloyd.
yes, correct.
With the, like, for example, the clothing allowance, is that something that would be appropriate?
Capitals would be from equipment down on page 4.
Oh, wrong page.
Guess I should go to this.
Okay, so that's not, yeah, so that's
We did
not
that in
100,000,
We shift the capital to,
right?
There's not 100 grand there. If we're looking at this equipment line and down.
Gun and fire. Or capital.
Try my motion again.
Supplies, though, are a different story.
yeah,
If you're talking about supplies.
I would,
Like officer duty
I'm trying to come up with
supplies.
100 grand. That's what I'm trying to come up with. That is not
Uniforms is 32.7.
personnel.
I don't know if that's considered an or wait, no, uniforms is 10, sorry.
Where's our Lloyd?
The police has almost $900,000 in Lloyd already. And it's uniforms, duty supplies, SWAT supplies. I mean, it's all those things.
So,
Are you looking
is
at the
it,
revenue sheet?
No, I'm listening.
Did the motion get seconded, or did I even complete the motion?
I guess we
The
haven't
motion
really
was made yet.
determined what,
Then I would make a motion to move $100,000 from the police budget,
From the-
starting with the 400 series, and then if that doesn't accomplish it, go, the line items that talk about supplies, go up to $100,000, move those under Lloyd, and then add $100,000 to the police overtime.
Got a motion, do I have a second?
I'm not sure I understand.
yeah.
Because you're not creating more money anywhere, right? I mean,
No, you're shifting
you're just
the-
moving the two items back.
If I'm understanding this right, you're not telling the chief no on overtime, you're telling the chief no on all these other things. Right? I mean, essentially is what you're doing.
Well, he's not saying
No,
no. He's
No,
saying
he's-
pay
he's-
for it out
Just
of,
moving it from one
I'm
place to
going to
another.
increase our Lloyd budget.
So he wants to add
Take it out of
100,000 to
Lloyd
Lloyd, but we need to find 100,000 of expenses that can be expended from Lloyd, so that 100,000 in the general fund is freed up for overtime.
Because we have the 450 that's not allocated yet, is that where it's coming from?
no,
No?
let's edit.
Right.
Well, 450 is
Is,
an
what,
edit.
is there anything
That
not,
hasn't even been touched.
is there anything not allocated from?
How much of Lloyd did we not allocate?
There's,
$185,000.
Oh, well, there's
Well-
100 thing.
But we're making a decision, not asking
But,
the department head what his plans are for equipment purchases.
well,
we're still
just
funding
moving it to a
it.
different- yeah,
We're
we're still
just
It's just
doing
being
different
paid out of a
funds.
different checkbook.
Yeah, we're-
He gets all that.
So did I just hear you
But we're
right, there's
taking-
185 unappropriated?
in edit, or in Lloyd.
Lloyd.
Yeah.
But we're
Why aren't we just
taking,
using the 100?
That's what we're trying to do,
That's
but
what he is saying.
there has to be specific purposes for Lloyd.
It's
So
going to
he's
die
trying
for the lack
find-
of a second.
but we're taking that,
What?
This is too complicated.
I don't
that
understand.
money without
The
speaking to
chief
the
funded.
chief about what his plans are for that.
We're not taking any
We're
money.
not taking it away.
We're just giving him 100,000 extra from
Lloyd.
unallocated
Right.
Lloyd.
But I'm pretty sure he probably knows that's there. And we're not
Should ask
asking
for it
him.
then. Should ask for it then.
I mean, he didn't ask for,
the
he
budget.
didn't ask for an appropriation for any of it.
Not yet. I'm just saying, we're just making a decision without conferring. But, okay.
I think I got a motion and I got a second. Is there,
I'm not clear on the motion. I know we're moving $100,000 from here to there, but what is it specifically that we're moving?
Well, let's take a 10-minute break and I'll add up
Okay.
$100,000.
All of the 400 series is 19,500.
Okay? Now,
It's a long way to go.
where's 80, can we come up with $80,500 in somewhere else? Because the intent is not for him to lose any of his budget. It's just shifting that and utilizing more of our unappropriated dollars.
what do we do?
Is it our practice that we don't
I
use
made my
low for
motion.
personnel, or is it the law that we don't use low for personnel?
It's been practice.
Practice.
Not long.
Well, I can tell you with the conversation with Chief Hedrick and Chief Kavanaugh, I'm not for paying salaries out of Lowit, but with Lowit being the one that's increasing because of the really River Ridge, we need to kind of reevaluate how we spend Lowit anyway.
I mean, I don't know
Pretty
what's,
soon that budget's going to be, the revenue is going to be larger than equipment needs.
yeah.
So says you.
got a
There's lots of expensive toys out there.
Yeah.
The HSA contribution is $88,000 number that could potentially not be.
Yeah, that's a maximum.
There we go again.
Woo.
Kind of there, kind of not.
I mean, I,
Good $80,000 number.
Lisa, who else is trying to say something?
Oh, I'm sorry, Les?
Wouldn't it be, now that Scott has mentioned that, I know that's always been the policy, not to use the way for certain things. Wouldn't it be easier to keep police department's budget as is, and use $100,000 out of weight to fund the additional overtime that it needs? You may or may not need it.
It's true.
Put it on $1,000 line item in Lloyd for police overtime and
Oh, I don't-
overtime of $100,000 if you're not careful.
Your recognition of my good idea goes nowhere.
Well,
Put that in the minutes.
I've noticed how.
Put it in the minutes.
Take the L out of
I'm
butter
just
and it's
kidding.
over.
I like that.
Instead of trying to add up and shifting things around.
I agree with that.
So do
I
y'all,
think we don't
I
expect
agree
this
with
to be
that.
more than one.
And
So
honestly,
do we-
I mean, we have done more than just like casually look at the numbers. At some point, some council is going to have to reevaluate the way Lloyd is spent. Now,
Well,
there are
And there's 2
nice
million in
toys.
surplus,
Yeah,
so.
there's only so many shiny things.
The helicopter.
Yeah.
So currently, what is on the table? Nathan's original motion with Ed seconding, is that correct?
no, Scott
I'll
Hawkins.
second that.
So
Oh.
do you all want to leave your motion to, or
I didn't understand
You're
it.
gonna withdraw it and let it go, put the lid in the Lloyd. Put the
and
100,000 in Lloyd.
put the, in a
Overtime.
OT line item?
No, I'm gonna keep, I don't wanna be I don't wanna start paying payroll yet I've fought that battle forever. Maybe I'll be convinced, but not, we don't have to
Not
this year.
today.
Right.
We don't have
We
to
don't have
this
to
year.
change the world
Well,
today.
Well, if you look on page 3 of, this is the packet for tonight, page 3 of the packet. If you go from office supplies, which is 101-006-421-010, that's 16.2. If you go down through, just go from there, all the way down through about the third line from the bottom, fourth line, and end with 5,000. But in the middle there, there's a public relations line item that I would, for 10 grand, I would not include that. That's right around your 100. So what, I guess my motion would be to eat up the 19.5, the back page, or the second half of their budget there, the back page that Heather mentioned, 19.5, and then start with that 16 and go down until you get your 100,000, and those just move to the Lloyd page. That's my recommendation. If we want to vote it down and re-vote on something else,
So we're looking at office supplies, fuel, medical supplies, skipping public relations, canine supplies, uniforms, ammunition, bike patrol supplies, river patrol supplies, SWAT supplies, police intelligence. Have I got to the end yet, or we keep going?
I think you said it ends
You
at
keep-
5,000.
it is 5,000.
Other supplies, safety supplies, officer duty supplies, furnitures and fixtures, and that's the end of it. Move those
I
things.
would ask that the finance double-check that math, but, because there's more than enough in what you just read to equal the 100.
Okay.
So just go up to the 100 with those, and that would be my recommendation.
I like it, okay. Is there any other further comment? Not all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries.
Guys, I'm gonna make a motion to adjourn. I'm just kidding.
And on the high note,
So then I'd make the motion that we reinstate the 100 grand in the overtime.
That
From the
that
general
part of your
fund.
part of the
that
motion?
was it, yeah, yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah, that was
Okay.
part of the motion.
All right,
Public relations we're keeping in
yes.
the general.
Okay, but really though, is that adjourn? Are we,
No,
is that all the issues? 6:30, that gives Heather just 30 minutes to.
To do this, so we can have a
Actually
clean
do
copy
this.
this time.
Right, so do I have a,
I'm not gonna have y'all.
I'll make a motion if no other council members have
does that get
anything.
us there?
Hold it, can you pause for just a second?
Absolutely.
Coming up with $120,000. Is that what you were saying?
No, but you.
We want to stop at 100.
Go, stop where you get to
Get it to
100,000.
100.
Get it to 100.
Get it to 100, and leave the other there.
Got it. Well, I can do that.
So
Okay.
then